Hey everyone, let's build our dream fairy house. I drew a couple of sketches, but I pretty much already know what I want to do, so we can just jump right into building. I'm using a toilet paper roll. These things used to be worth their weight in gold about 4 years ago, and I have decided that 1/8 of an inch is going to be equal to 1 foot of real world height and distance. Interestingly, Google says that's like 1/96th scale, which I don't think I've seen used anywhere else. It's a really random scale, but I'm not going to be sticking to it too closely. I just need a general idea of how big things should be so that I don't get a door that's like way too big for the house and makes it look a little bit more childish, I guess, for lack of a better word, than I want it to be. I'm using paper mache and wood glue mixed with water. This is a really good recipe, and I found out about it here on YouTube from Ultimate Paper Mache's channel. If you have a paper mache project coming up, definitely check that channel out. It's all about paper mache, and it's really helped me out. The stairs and the doors and the windows and all of the other cardboard pieces are coming from a flattened out tissue box that I had because I unfortunately got sick. And when I went to the doctor, it seemed like everybody in the entire area had the same cold. So I unfortunately went through a ton of tissues, and it's good for crafting because now I get to recycle that tissue box. I actually tried to use mostly recycled materials for this entire build, and it was really nice getting back to just like really basic materials and not having to spend any money. Although I have been super fortunate that now that I have a Patreon, I have a budget to be able to buy craft supplies and things like that, which I'm so grateful for that. But it was a lot of fun just doing things with cardboard and like popsicle sticks for this build. Cutting tissue box cardboard was a little bit trickier than I remember it being, but I also had a really dull Exacto knife, so I can't really blame the cardboard too much because I think it was more my knife. I wanted to make a little rain gutter, so I cut up some craft paper and rolled it up with some of the wood glue, and then I cut it into little pieces and painted it with some black acrylic paint. This is where having a sketch really comes in handy. Sometimes I have to force myself to do a sketch because the image is so clear in my brain that I think I can just go ahead and jump right in and start doing it. But it's really helpful to have a guide for all of the little details that I want to put in there when it comes time to actually build something. I put the rain gutter to the side for a little bit so that I could go over the outside of the building with white acrylic paint and cut out all of the windows. On this project, I finally remembered to paint the base outside of the house and door and everything first, and that makes it a lot easier to just paint the other things that I'm going to be gluing to the outside. It ended up being easier to add the pipes in small pieces than to try and bend the paper into the shape that I wanted, so I chopped it up and then I glued it on with more wood glue. Honestly, wood glue is the star of the show of this build. I use it for pretty much every single part, including this next part where I am going to add some vines to the outside of the building. So I've got some brown embroidery floss here that I've chopped up into little pieces, and I'm gluing them on with the wood glue and sticking them wherever I want my vine to go. They're the base of the vine that I'm going to have trailing all over the house. I'm using wood glue mixed with water again. And I'm spreading that mixture generously all over this tissue that I have flattened out on a Ziploc bag, just so it won't be too messy. And then I'm going to add some paint to that, and this is going to be what I use to make the flowers. This just has a different look than normal paper being cut up into small pieces. And I inadvertently discovered something here. I made like a scientific discovery. It's not really that crazy, but the side that was in contact with the plastic of the Ziploc bag became super shiny and glossy. Now, I don't know what to do with that information yet, but I feel like that's definitely going to be something I can use in another project. So even though this is a fairy house, I didn't want to go with like a traditional cottage looking fairy house, and so I decided to cover it with bougainvillea vines, which are growing all over where I live here in Los Angeles. And the flowers themselves on that plant kind of look like they're made of tissue paper, so it seemed like it would be an easy and like realistic flower to cover the walls with. I used the top of the tissue roll that I had cut off earlier, made it a little bit bigger so that I could make a cap out of it to go on top. Shout out to this Korean newspaper that I got in K-Town 100% for free. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 잘 지냈어요? Hopefully everybody's doing well. You guys haven't seen Allball in a while, Allball being my cat who just appeared on screen, but he made it his personal life's mission to destroy this project while I was working on it. So I decided he probably wanted some screen time, and I just left him in there for you guys to say hi to. I'm covering this top in some painter's tape, and then I'm going over that. At first I used craft paper to go over it, but it was kind of thick, so I used the newspaper, and I should have just started with the newspaper. I don't know why I thought I needed 2 layers, but the newspaper worked super well, and once it was dry, I was able to sand it down and get it really smooth. And then I got a stick from my lemon tree that sadly did not survive me not watering it during the winter, and I'm recycling that into the top part of my fairy house. So I'm just drilling a hole to stick it down in there with, you guessed it, more wood glue. Actually used for wood this time. And then I am painting over it with acrylic paint. I used a combination of brown and black. I decided to paint on the design of an acorn top rather than have it be all bumpy and have those characteristic diamonds all over it. At first, I was trying to keep it very organized, but somewhere along the way, I think I messed up and got confused about where each dot should be, so I just started putting them wherever it felt right and tried to keep the balance okay. I did 3 shades of brown for the top. I started with the darkest brown, and then I worked my way up to a lighter one, and then at the very top, I just used yellow, and I tried to only paint a small section of each circle. Once that was finished, I felt like I was pretty much finished with the project, but then I felt like it was just missing something. It was a little too dull. So I asked on Patreon, and it seemed like most people thought that it definitely could use some gloss varnish. So I went over it with gloss varnish for the top, and then I eventually ended up putting gloss all over the entire thing because I loved the way it looked, and I felt like it just seemed a little bit more finished that way. I wanted to add in some fairy lights, and I realized that I needed a way to be able to turn it on once this thing was all closed up. So I hot glued in the switch to the bottom, and I kind of packed in a little bit of newspaper at the bottom so it wouldn't wiggle around, and then put the lights in, and that worked out. So I was really happy with how that looked. Next, I hot glued on the acorn top and just sort of just wiggled it in place there. And you can see some damage from when Allball tried to attack the house, but I fixed that a little bit later. This video is brought to you guys by my Patreon. Big shout out to Jordan, Lisa, Ryan, Fred, and Lori, my tier 3 patrons, and everyone on Patreon who gave me advice on what to do with the gloss for this build, and just all of my Patreon in general. Thank you so, so much, and I hope I see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.
Papa. Why? Why do you hate this thing so much?